Hello, everyone. Hello, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for attending this Yole Développement live market briefing dedicated to the processor market. My name is Faisal El-Kamasi. I'm a sales coordination and customer service manager for Yole Développement. Based on how processor monitor, the aim of this live market briefing is to provide you in 30 minutes an update to date analysis of this market with a focus on recent strategy developments in the processor market, examining how the main players look to catch the next growth cycle. How senior technology and market analyst in computing and software division at Yole Développement, John Lawrence, will provide a snapshot of the overall market for processor and a few of the major market trends extracted from the Yole's Highlight Detailed Processor Market Monitors 2022 Q1 edition. Before we get started, I remind you that you are encouraged to submit questions to our analysts during all the live events using the Ask a Question window at the bottom of the screen. Question will be answered right after the presentation. In case we don't have time to answer all of them, we will follow up with you by email. To conclude, this live event is recorded. You will receive tomorrow an email with the link to the access to the recorded session. So let's start this live market briefing and welcome John. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Faisal. Hello, and welcome to our live market briefing on the processor market. Today, we will discuss a few of the recent strategic moves made, as well as give a look ahead to some of the technological realities coming later this year. First, we will look closer at Intel's recent moves, mainly around the foundry business. This will be examined through the lens of what has worked in previous semi-growth cycles and how this time is different. Next, we will spend time considering to what extent AMD is a new company following the acquisition of Xilinx. After that, we will consider the road ahead for ARM-based laptops and where the opportunity can be for Qualcomm to leverage the ex-Nuvia assets. And finally, in terms of process technology, 2022 should be a year where we see the commercialization of 3nm class foundry nodes. And we will consider the implications of this new landmark. When we look back at the last major semi-growth cycle, that of the smartphone era, it was easy to understand the dynamic that led major suppliers to experience good revenue growth. The smartphone was a new consumer product whose performance, form factor, and user experience made it destined to find homes in the pockets of so many individuals across the whole world. The key for major semiconductor suppliers was to gain design wins with smartphone OEMs and ride that wave of increasing smartphone demand. As an example, you see here, we follow Qualcomm's revenue growth through the early 20-teens, at the same time as smartphone volume is increasing here. You see Qualcomm revenue reaching 2.5 times, growing 2.5 times during the same period. And it's no coincidence that at around when smartphone volume starts to plateau in 2016, as it coincides with Qualcomm's revenue plateauing until 2019, 2020, when the 5G revolution really picks them up again. So this is the old cycle, the smartphone cycle. But we're not in a smartphone-driven cycle anymore. In fact, the next major growth of the adoption of a single lens system, like a PC or a smartphone, could be like the ADAS-enabled automobile. But for many reasons, this cycle, the adoption of those which may not be as fast as smartphones, for instance, or as fast as PCs. You have higher levels of autonomy, are not ready for prime time yet, of course, and the average lifespan of a single system is much, much longer. And entrenched technology will be much harder to supplant in that kind of a market. However, the fundamental technology behind autonomous driving and making it possible is also causing disruption in many other realms around the edge. This is the edge AI era, and instead of one of a killer end system that will drive major semiconductor growth, it's one of a killer technology applied across many applications with potential in almost all facets of modern life. We could see it in security, surveillance, retail, agriculture, medicine, and that's just naming a few of the many realms that could have a major disruption from the application of AI or machine learning with sensed data. Who can win in this era? Lots of players can win in this era. The team that develops an implementation that takes off will of course win, but the scale of that win will not be on the same scale as a major smartphone design win. It will be spread across many implementations, and the scale will not be the same as before. However, you aggregate this across many successful implementations, and you can see the whole semi industry witness a major growth cycle, of course. So the question for major semi players is how to capitalize on this. It's a little bit different, a winning business model, of course. And certainly a company can task a team with a large company can task a team with trying to strike gold on some of these edge AI implementations of their own. And we see that. We see companies taking swipes at that. Intel with projects like Loihi, where research on neuromorphic AI might lead to commercial success. But we also see another way for big semi players to capitalize is to wait and see which approaches gain traction, and then take hold and acquire those winning approaches and bring them into the fold. That activity is also underway, of course. But one way to guarantee more benefit from this cycle is to reposition oneself in the ecosystem. So becoming a foundry to or to sell IP to the players and the winners, ultimately the winners in edge AI, means that you will ride that wave with them and gain some of that piece of that success pie that everyone else will be benefiting from. So that's where Intel seems to be positioning. Of course, the core business of processors in data center and in client is still very important and will continue to be so as it complements the data center infrastructure needed for edge AI. But they are also looking to be a supplier to the edge AI winners altogether. The acquisition of Tower shores up what may have been a blind spot for Intel. Intel has great manufacturing technology, of course, but that kind of relationship between a foundry and its customers is different than that among an IDM's fab, product engineering, and the market-facing teams. Tower brings the foundry customer service experience along with a set of foundry technology that is completely complementary to Intel's existing core technology. So they should not be stepping on any toes with that. Turning and looking now at AMD, who recently closed the acquisition of Xilinx. In the context of this coming semi-cycle driven by edge AI, AMD still has room to grow just in their core businesses, which are of course important to the edge AI revolution as supporting the infrastructure, of course. Additionally, new products and data center acceleration like the MI200 series of data center GPUs are well positioned to grow their business in the accelerated data center space. But what of the Xilinx acquisition? This brings two immediate benefits we see. The FPGA-based hardware has advantages over GPU-based for certain acceleration applications, like in SmartNIC, for example. This lets AMD offer a fuller acceleration portfolio to its data center customers. Additionally, we estimate that a growing portion of the Xilinx business is in the embedded compute space, where AMD has not been as large. So this should open the door of AMD's core compute business to more potential customers in those embedded segments. In the non-x86 PC space, if we look back into the more traditional applications for compute-like PCs, we have some pockets of growth as well. We have over a year with the Apple M1 and its derivatives, or add-ons, I suppose, showing that there is a way to do high-end compute on ARM-based architecture. This is the trend that Qualcomm looks to capitalize on. And it was just after the launch of Apple M1 that Qualcomm announced the deal to buy Nuvia, which was founded by former Apple chip designers. We should see the first products from the newly integrated team later in 2022, according to Qualcomm's November 2021 Investor Day. And you can see here what we expect from the growth. While we expect overall PCs to be somewhat flat through this time frame, we do see that a pocket of growth in the non-x86 based CPU at 7% CAGR. Similarly, we also see growth in that data centers piece of the server GPU and the server CPUs. Now, if we think about how on the manufacturing side of things, 2022 should be a landmark year for new lithography nodes and even new transistor architecture. We are expecting to see early silicon on both TSMC's and Samsung's 3nm class foundry nodes. And of a particular note, the Samsung offering will be the first commercialized gate all-around transistor architecture. We should also see the Intel 4 node. That's their follow-up to the Intel 7, released early in 2021. And so it's an exciting time for the process technology side of things. To think about the leading edge and how it relates to the edge AI piece, there's interesting features there. That's edge AI doesn't need to be on leading edge technology. What's important there is, of course, low power and being able to wrap the machine learning algorithms into a clean software environment, and to sense data at the edge and apply that machine learning at the edge. Don't necessarily need to be at leading edge technology to do that, but we do need leading edge technology in the data center to support those functions. What we also see an interesting trend will be in how naturally, as these leading edge nodes get more and more expensive to develop on, we see innovations elsewhere in the ecosystem to control those costs, namely in 2.5D or 3D advanced packaging techniques to help bring more functionality into a single device, while at the same time keeping down the cost of the overall silicon. So we expect to see the next major semi cycle driven by further implementation of AI and machine learning technologies. One can argue that this has already begun within the data center machine learning acceleration space. And just look at NVIDIA data center revenues, for instance. But we expect this to commence at the edge as well, where low power, low latency, and low cost are key differentiators to the major semiconductor companies, and are organizing themselves to capture this trend. The leading edge will always be important, especially at the highest end of performance. But in parallel, we will see new approaches to control costs in other ways, like the advancement of chiplets, for example. And that closes our review of the recent strategic moves in the processor space. And we will now open it up for some questions.
Thank you very much, John, for this very interesting presentation. So yes, let's start now. We received some questions. We will try to answer as many as we can, and for the remaining one, we will do it by email. So let's start with the first questions. So John, against the backdrop of these investments in new manufacturing capacity, how big is the risk of overbuilding capacity?
Yeah, that's a question we get fairly often. So what we saw with 2020 and 2021, that showed us that just-in-time supply chains was not as resilient as necessary, given the amount of supply chain disruption that occurred. And at the same time, we have certain geopolitical forces causing a greater regionalization of supply chains as well. So those two factors tell us that even just the demand that the industry thought was there should be even higher. Couple that with the massive potential for semi-content to enable edge AI. We think that the potential is much bigger than even the risk of oversupply, or overbuild.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question, similar to how the acquisition of Tower is de-risking Intel's foundry business, are there other aspects of their strategy that require further risk management?
Yes. So certainly in the discrete GPU space, that's a business that Intel is just getting started. And that may be somewhere where that could carry some new risk. But the entrenched incumbents there, AMD and NVIDIA, are not going to be quick to give up their share. But we could see some really interesting products from Intel here, because they're quite accustomed to graphics technology as they've been integrating it into many of their CPUs. But at the same time, there may be some significant price pressure if Intel has to really undercut in order to gain some foothold there. So potentially some risk. It's a new product for them, but I think they have the in-house technology to handle that.
Okay, great. The live market briefing is now ending. Thank you again, John, for your time and analysis. To everyone, you will receive soon an email with the link to the presentation within 34 hours. Feel free to share the presentation with colleagues. Finally, please let me remind you that you can find all our reports, tracks, and monitors on our website, www.i-micronews.com. Do not hesitate to contact us if you have additional questions. You can find our contact details on the last slide of the presentation. Thank you all for joining us today, and have a great day and take care.